series to come out because it arrives at a time when I think many of us are really trying to figure out what the direction of the entire American system is, what the future of our constitutional democracy is, what the relationship of the economy, of money and corporations to political power is. And all of that is kind of up for grabs and in need of interpretation, reinterpretation. But one side of it that certainly hasn't got the attention that it deserves, but that it does get in this movie, is the national security or the military side of things, because that is a colossal piece of any puzzle if you're trying to figure out what the direction of the United States is going to be now. So I think it's a wonderful moment for this to come out. Well, we're invited to mention things that we learned from this movie. One, obviously, I didn't know about that convention of 1944. Much less did I expect that it was the hinge of human history. But it's very interesting to see how that works from the glimpse of it that we got in the film, because I think in the context of the questions that we're preoccupied with now about this sort of systemic future of the country, here we see a relationship, or a potential relationship, very deep and dramatic, between the domestic on the one side and the foreign policy on the other side. So really the idea is that a whole different foreign policy, maybe no bomb, this was explicitly suggested, maybe no Cold War, and so forth, had the United States, had the convention chosen Henry Wallace, and had he then become president. But then comes the question, which Douglas has already alluded to, and that is, and I'd like to underscore that, or put another underlining under it there, and that is, why was it that he was kicked off, dumped from the ticket? It wasn't just that he wasn't chosen, he was actually dumped. And that really comes in two parts. And who were those party bosses, and what interests did they represent, and what domestic forces, and what were their motivations, and what was it at that time? After all, there had been no Cold War so far, so they couldn't be reacting to that. So what was it? So what was the relationship, again, of the economic and the domestic to the foreign? So that's number one. Finally, and very quickly, because one could go on indefinitely about this, and that's the very powerful section on the atomic bomb, with which I wholly agree. But I think the passage there that was most interesting to me and most unknown to me was the relationship of Nazi Germany to Japan and their failure to coordinate, setting the stage for the eventual Soviet entry into the war. So you really have two levels of unknown here. On the one side, it's that relationship among those two Axis countries. And the second, which is better known, at least in revisionist literature, which is really becoming mainstream literature historically, and that is the really critical importance of the Soviet invasion for the defeat of Japan, which is something that becomes more historically secure and accepted with every year that passes. My comment about that, though, goes back to my suggestion that we're really having to rethink the American system. And in order to do that, I think it's obviously critically important to get our past right. And obviously, a key event, the key event, I don't know, I could make that argument in America, in recent American history of the last 65, 67 years, was the use of the atomic bomb. Certainly the United States at that point crossed a moral point beyond which there was no turning back. Who was it in the movie who said that, Peter?
Sure.
Who used that?
Moral threshold.
The moral threshold. Someone refers to it as a moral threshold.
Oppenheimer.
Maybe
Stimson.
Thank you very much. And surely it was that. My own view is that whether or not the bomb was used to end the war or to intimidate the Soviet Union, we unquestionably crossed that threshold. And I think that in any thinking about the future of the United States, we have to take into account the deep and long influence that acceptance of this instrument of unparalleled destruction has had upon us. Because since that day, we've really said to ourselves and to the world, we can't get rid of this, we can't get out of this trap, and therefore we now live in a civilization that actually depends crucially and irreparably on being able to utterly destroy that same civilization. That's a whole new moral equation for the United States and for the world. I'd add that, General Groves said that he thought that Truman didn't so much make a decision as fail to cancel one, and I agree with that also, about 80%, although there were elements of a decision there. But what I'd add is that we as a country have not yet made that decision either in regard to nuclear weapons, and we're still thinking it over. And until we do,